Right, I know everyone was expecting to hear from me and Ned Potter today. Unfortunately, Ned spent, by the sounds of it, most of the day sat in a car in a stationary queue of traffic and is still not here. So he may well run in halfway through, but for the moment I'm going to take you through this. Can everyone see the screen okay, by the way, with where I'm standing? Okay. So this is us, this is me and my invisible friend who's not here. What we'd like to stress straight away is that although we're going to talk about marketing libraries and escaping the echo chamber, neither one of us are marketing experts. Neither one of us, in fact, are particularly experienced librarians. We're both new professionals. So we're not making any claim to have all the answers here. We're not speaking as experts. We're speaking as people who are interested in these ideas and who are concerned that there are some fantastic ideas being talked about in libraries, there's some fantastic stuff being done in libraries, but it's not reaching the people who need to know about it. So to start off by talking about what is the echo chamber. Bethan gave you a very brief introduction earlier. Essentially, the echo chamber refers to ideas being discussed and transmitted inside an enclosed area. So they reinforce, everybody talks about great ideas, hey, I've had this great idea, oh yeah, I think that's great as well, why don't we do it? But it doesn't actually reach anyone outside of the little group that's talking about it. Just to make clear, we don't mean, there is also a slightly sinister side to the term the echo chamber. It's also been used to describe the phenomenon by which people deliberately repeat misinformation and feed that into an enclosed space and let it be repeated until people start to believe it. That's something that the tobacco industry was quite notorious for doing. That's not what we're talking about. We're not trying to convince anyone of erroneous statements here. We think libraries are great and we think everyone else should know that libraries are great. So that's just a brief summary there. I should point out this bit was supposed to be Ned's. If any of this presentation seems a little bit under-rehearsed, it's because it is. So, sorry. We think this idea matters because, well, first of all, I think everybody knows libraries in every sector and on both sides of the Atlantic are in trouble. Libraries are a soft target for cuts. We're all out of money. And libraries are a soft target for cuts because a lot of people don't see them as important, and because we don't earn money. The value that we provide is intangible. So it's actually very difficult to get that across if people don't really understand what we do. It's also the case that there are many more channels for library scepticism than there are for library advocacy. And what we mean by that is essentially it's just easier to criticise libraries than it is to defend them. A handy little diagram demonstrating that there. Basically, people who are criticising libraries have all the old negative stereotypes about libraries to fall back on. They can talk about how libraries are just warehouses for dirty old books and nobody uses them anymore, and all the information we need is online anyway, so why do we need libraries? They can peddle that in the mass media, that there will be an audience for it because everybody likes to have their prejudices confirmed. If you're defending libraries, you can talk to existing users, you can talk to people who are online and engage with the library community, but you won't reach the same people that the library skeptics are reaching. And basically, if people don't know how we can help them, they won't come to us. I do genuinely believe that if libraries were invented tomorrow, it would be revolutionary. Libraries are a fantastic idea. Where else can you go to get quality information, quality authoritative information, and experts to help you find that information, in most cases for free? That's a fantastic idea, and we need to remind people that that's a fantastic idea. So, what should we do about it? Well, we decided to start off just by basically identifying the problem and finding out what other people were thinking about it, and seeing if we could, between us, come up with a strategy for tackling this problem. So we started off just by asking about it on Twitter and on our blogs. Of course, that in itself is a perfect example of an echo chamber because not everybody is on Twitter, but it's a starting place for talking about it. So we thought we'd crowdsource some ideas that people had for actually breaking out of the echo chamber. We got quite a lot of suggestions from Twitter and from people writing on their blogs about it, so I'm just going to go through some of the best ideas that came out of that. First off, Bobby Newman, who's an American librarian, she emphasised that basically what I just said, we need to stop talking to each other. It's great to share ideas with your peers, but you're not going to learn anything from people just saying, oh yeah, great idea. You need to actually reach people who are outside of that little bubble and who don't already know what you're doing. The statement here I quite like. Change isn't made by a blog or from a conference podium. Changes are made in offices, in conference rooms, in whispered hallway conversations and lunchtime banter. Now what I take from that is that basically we can't expect things to change overnight. It's not about making some grand sweeping statement, and it's not about attention grabbing new initiatives and so on, although those have a role to play. What can be more effective is what I like to think of as a kind of hearts and minds strategy. It's just a long-term chipping around the edges and persuading people of the benefit of what we do. Comment from Phil there, who's at the back, I think. Yes, everybody look at Phil now. Phil's suggestion here, which I quite like, is to get someone who's never been in the library before, or even, I think, to get someone who has used the library but didn't come back again because they didn't like what they found. Get them to come in and narrate what they see, what works for them, what doesn't, and what they would change. It's really difficult to invite criticism. It's much nicer to listen to people saying what they like about your service, but you don't learn anything from that. Inviting criticism is necessary to know what it is that you're doing wrong. Along the same lines, we have a suggestion from Beth about a library survey where only negative comments were allowed, which sounds horrible. I'd hate doing that, but you'd learn a lot from it. I'd like to know if anyone would have the guts to do that, actually. I'm not really sure I would, but might be worth a try. So? If you could get it past your manager, yeah. Emma Cragg suggested using library champions, and so using... And here's Ned, who's arrived, marvellous. You're here. Shall I just carry on and jump in when you're ready? Okay. Well, I like the champions. I like the idea of using people who are already fans of the library to convert their peers and their co-workers, because people are more likely to listen to someone who has shared experiences, who understands what they're working on and who's working on some of the same things. Unfortunately, part of the fact that librarians are we're undervalued as a profession. A lot of people don't think libraries have anything of value, don't think that librarians have anything of value to offer them. So if that's what they're thinking, then they're not going to listen to us if we start trying to persuade them to come and use our services. But if they can hear that from someone who already does use our services, knows what value that we offer, and is on the same level as them, that's a much more powerful way of getting the message across. Language is incredibly important. You need to match your vocabulary to your audience. So what this is really about is really getting inside your users' heads, finding out what they want, listening to the language they use, and trying to mirror that back to them. That, in any kind of persuasion, is one of the most powerful tools you can use, is to reflect a person's language back to them. So talk to them about what they want and listen to what they say. And sort of along the same lines, really, Andy Prieston suggested target non-converts by interviewing them about their information needs and covertly sell the library and services at the same time. So what this is about really is, I like to think of it as stealth marketing, because you're not setting out with the goal to sell, you're talking to them about what they want and what they're doing and what they need. And you can use that time to say, oh, do you know, if you're doing that, do you know we can do this as well? And it's just a slightly more subtle way to get your message to someone who might be a bit resistant to being given the hard sell. That being said, the hard sell also has its place. You can't assume that people actually know what we do. In times gone by, it would have been the case that people had to come to the library to get information. That's no longer the case. People can avoid us, and people will if they don't know what we offer. So sometimes you do need to actually give it the hard sell and really, literally just set out everything that we do and what benefit they can get from that. Simon Barron here suggesting expanding service and getting attention by going beyond the call of duty. Now that's something that I know within my own sector. I work for a law library. That's something that we're very focused on. Libraries are quite often a last resort. People come to us when they've exhausted every search opportunity, Google has let them down, they can't find it anywhere else, and they phone us in desperation, I can't find this anywhere, can you check for me? And the amount of times that happens, and I've found what they're looking for within 5 minutes, is really quite astonishing. I'm sure I can see a few nods. I think a lot of people have that kind of story. So if you can remind people of actually how much time they can save by coming to you first, and if you can actually anticipate your users' needs, so look for the patterns in what people are looking for, learn what your users want, and see if you can actually be proactive. Put the information in front of them before they start wasting time on Google. I'm just going to mention here the M-Word Marketing Libraries blog, a fantastic resource if you haven't looked at it, by the way. It's really good blog to read if you're interested in these kinds of ideas. They mentioned recently a concept known as the chocolate problem in marketing, which is basically, if you're a marketer and your client is chocolate, you have a problem because everybody knows what chocolate is, everybody likes it, so you're not going to get the all-important word-of-mouth marketing. Because when was the last time somebody came running up to you and said, "Oh my God, I've just tried the most amazing thing, you have to try it, it's called chocolate"? That's not going to happen because people aren't going to get enthusiastic about something that everybody already knows about. So if you are marketing chocolate, what you have to do is things like what Cadbury have done with their advertising campaign. They've released a series of adverts that have absolutely nothing to do with chocolate or Cadbury's. There's the drumming gorilla and the racing trucks and so on. And they're nothing to do with the product, but they make people smile and they get people talking. And I do think that has a parallel with libraries, because although people may not use us, people may not really understand what we do, we have a positive brand. People like libraries, people feel positive about the term library. But because people think they know what we stand for, and because that's not interesting to them, they're not going to talk about us. It's not going to become an exciting product that people talk about. So perhaps there is a way to actually just sort of rejuvenate that interest and remind people of what's exciting about what we offer. I'm suggesting things like offering books on the Xbox for teenagers and personal librarian spend on Facebook. Now that I could see being very successful if your users and potential users are teenagers who use the Xbox and hang out on Facebook. I think the broader point there is the need to just go where your users are. Find out what spaces they use, find out where they hang out online, find out what events they go to, where they shop, and see what you can push into those areas that they'll see. Matthew Maven here is suggesting setting up a library PR wiki as a way of sharing best practice. I don't think that's actually got off the ground, but I think the point to remember here is that there's no need to reinvent the wheel, really. A lot of libraries are doing very innovative things, a lot of people are working very hard to sell their services, and we are as a profession quite open and quite good at sharing ideas. So if you can look at what other similar libraries to you are doing, and I'm not going to say steal, but maybe borrow some people's ideas and thank them, obviously, and give them credit. We do like to share things with each other as librarians, and we like to help each other out. So take advantage of that. And finally, and I think most importantly, you need to remember that nobody is going to do this on our behalf. This is all of our jobs now. And if we as librarians don't stand up for libraries and don't put time and effort into making sure that everybody knows what libraries are for and how they can help, then nobody else is going to do that.
Good evening, everybody. I live about 3.5 hours drive away from London, and I set off at 8 a.m. today, and I've been in the car ever since with a 3.5-month-old baby. It's been a really good time. I'm so very sorry that I'm incredibly late. Thank you so much to Laura for doing the bit that I was supposed to do earlier, and thank you to Voices of Good Library for going first. So I think Laura will have explained the echo chamber thing and come up with some suggestions that we've harvested from various people on social media. We want to give you some examples of the library community's failure to escape the echo chamber, so you can see how it actually is detrimental to the profession when we don't escape. So the first thing which kind of kicked off this whole thing for Laura and I was the Seth Godin Uber Echo Disaster. Seth Godin is a marketing guru in the US. He's the best-selling marketing author on Amazon, and his blog is the most widely read blog for marketers and on marketing subjects. So he's a hugely influential man with a reach of literally millions of people. He turned his attention to libraries in a post called The Future of the Library in January this year, and I'll read you the most important bits that he said. He starts off by saying, what should libraries do to become relevant in the digital age? And he goes on, here's my proposal, train people to take intellectual initiative. And he adds, once again, the net turned things upside down. Information is free now, no need to pull tax money to buy reference books. So you can imagine that the response from the library community to this was somewhat indignant, and there was 3 main points that people took him to task on. The first of all is, obviously libraries are relevant in the digital age. Thanks very much, Seth. Second of all, we've been training people to take the intellectual initiative for years. Thanks very much, Seth. And thirdly, we have an enormous problem in libraries of branding because people don't realise that we're spending millions on their behalf to subscribe to e-resources, e-journals, e-books, databases and so on. And there is a myth that we all know about, which is that information is free because of the internet, which is not true. And for someone as web savvy as Seth Godin to perpetuate that myth is extremely frustrating. So that was the third thing that people took about. So what happened next was pretty awesome actually. Toby Greenwald, who Laura just quoted in the previous section, started the ball rolling with his post about how wrong Seth Godin was, and he went on a real ranty diatribe, which was absolutely fantastic. And it also got responses from loads of hugely influential library bloggers who commented on the post. And if you go and look this post up, I've got handouts with me, which we will add at the end with links to this on. It's a fantastic, inspirational piece, and he gets really cross. And he says at the end, basically saying we already do this to librarians who don't see this as their raison d'etre. Please don't let the doors to the profession hit you on the ass on your way out. So that was pretty cool. But then it really snowballed, and more than 50 librarian bloggers took up the cause. And that's a little screen grab of a kind of Google blog search, but it's probably much bigger by now because there was more. And it was a genuinely quite inspirational thing because people were coming together from all over the UK, the US, Australia and Europe, kind of librarians uniting, and what they came up with was a fantastically eloquent, impassioned, articulate, brilliant dissection of what Seth said and why it was wrong. It was a genuinely inspiring and almost quite moving defence of the profession. However, who reads librarian blogs? Librarians and nobody else. So nobody notices except other librarians when we defend ourselves. And his original post probably reached about 500,000 people. At an estimate, the 50-odd responses to it might have reached 50,000 people, and of those 50,000, pretty much all of them were librarians who already knew that the information wasn't free because of the net, already knew that libraries were relevant in the digital age, and so on. And none of Seth's original audience would have got our response because he didn't allow comments on his blog. So we were just talking to each other whilst everybody who reads his blog thinks that he's right and that libraries are relevant in the digital age. Important thing to remember is that whether or not you agree with what he says, his opinion is essentially that of the majority of people outside the profession. Seth spoke for America, comments sharing that. That's what people think about libraries. Second thing that happened was the Newsnight Uber library disaster. I think this was in April. Libraries on Newsnight, probably not going badly, is it? That'd be brilliant. I'm sure it's a really positive story. There's the correspondent striding towards the camera. He asks, are libraries an ethos in search of a function? Thanks, David. Maybe you're a reporter in search of a soundbite. But then they quote some figures, and this is where it starts to get really bad. So their support of the argument for the fact that libraries were in decline is the statistic that, for the last available figures, circulation in the UK is down to 314,704 books throughout the total UK libraries. So that is indeed a very poor state of affairs, if that's what we're lending. I got a B at GCSE Maths, so I like to think I'm pretty good with the sums. I sat there working it out. There's 4,500 libraries in the UK. That's 69 books a year per library, total circulation, right? So I work for an academic library, admittedly, but we lent 1.3 million books last year. Surely we can't have lent 4 times as many books as the entire public library system in the UK combined. It was 314 million books, not 314,000. It was 1 to the power of 1,000. Library borrowing is actually up because they didn't use the most recent figures, which show an increase for the first time in years. And nobody had checked the facts. And I don't know how they... I mean, that's rubbish on the BBC's part not to get that so badly wrong. To add insult to injury, there was no one from CIP on the panel to kind of defend libraries. So there was a library campaigner, Alan Gibbons, who did a decent job, but it wasn't a librarian defending the industry, and it wasn't someone who could put their finger on the figure and say, actually, you're completely wrong, and you know, your figures are wrong to the power of 1,000. Twitter went mad with frustration. We all went bonkers. Nobody noticed except other librarians. We all talked to each other about how wrong the figure was. We got incredibly frustrated and irate. 2 million people watched Newsnight who got the wrong information about libraries. 20,000 librarians told each other the right information about libraries afterwards. So the original audience, there's no kind of retraction or correction by Newsnight. The original audience is still labouring under the misapprehension that our circulation is down to 314,000 because we weren't able to tell them otherwise. We just spoke to each other about it. Then Newsnight featured libraries again. The infamous KPMG report, the consultancy firm, published a report on the future of libraries and public services. They said a lot of stuff which was annoying, and one of the things that has really endured and is still being talked about now is this idea of staffing libraries with volunteers. And what they said was, in North America, libraries are often run by volunteers, not paid council staff, whilst in the UK, charity shops often have waiting lists of volunteers wanting to help them with book sales. So the implication is, if you can, people are getting physically angry with the audience, if you can work in Oxfam, someone comes up and says, how much is this book with a 50p price tag on, you say 50p, they give you 50p and then they leave. That's the same as being able to work in a library and do all the stuff that information professionals do. So why not get rid of all the paid staff and bring in the little old ladies who work in charity shops and save them a fortune? So obviously people in libraries were somewhat indignant at this idea, but also slightly bemused, because certainly I didn't know that North American libraries are staffed by volunteers. So where did they get their figures from? And the awesome Bethan Ruddock dissected the KPMG report brilliantly in her blog, and the particular quote that I'd like to draw your attention to is, has there been a recent report about borrowing levels or stats I've missed? Quite possibly, but there's no way of finding out through KPMG because they don't have any references. I'll say that again. A report from a top advisory firm aimed at reforming UK public services contains not a single reference, not one, nary a hint of a reference. Which I think Olivia is awesome use of nary. So we did what we often do in this situation. We asked on Twitter and got some responses from North American librarians, and they basically all said that it wasn't true. So we thought we'd check for sure, and we contacted the ALA, the American Library Association, who sort of speaks on behalf of public libraries. And the quote we received from them was, public libraries in the US, whilst overseen by volunteer elected boards, are managed by paid staff, with more than half of libraries reporting having a degreed librarian. And then, unlike KPMG, they give a reference, so we can go and check the table. So, the KPMG report is a load of bollocks. It's not true. They're either inaccurate or they're making it up. And keep that in mind when we get to the bit later about Ian Clarke's idea of who is writing the library narrative, because it's certainly not the librarians, and the people who are writing it don't necessarily have librarians' interests at heart. And in fact, I was at a conference yesterday and I didn't get to see a presentation that someone gave, but there was a lot of chat afterwards about, they were talking about the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of people's talking about librarians. The good people are obviously people who say good things about librarians. There's bad people who mean well, but like that Joan Bakewell piece on the BBC the other day, actually do more harm than good because they're so kind of nostalgic for, ooh, I grew up reading books, that they don't really do anything about, say anything about what libraries doing now. And then there's the ugly, which is people who are literally polluting the media with a load of rubbish. I think we all know I'm talking about Tim Coates, but there could be other people as well. So the point being that all these people are writing the library narrative and not us. So you can imagine what happened next. Twitter got very angry. We all went absolutely mad and talked about how the KPMG report was a load of rubbish. But nobody knows this except our librarians. There's two reasons why that's massive. First of all, it's fun to use Prexy to have massive words that dwarf everything. But second of all, it's a kind of a proper visual metaphor. This is what dwarfs all our efforts at advocacy, is if we talk to each other and nobody knows this except other librarians. This is the kind of the problem that runs through a lot of what we were doing. So the familiar refrain that's coming through all of this, people reach audiences of millions with incorrect information about libraries, and our riposte reaches only ourselves. But it's not all bad news. Here's Laura.
Yeah, I get to do the fun, positive bit now. They've depressed you all with all the failures. We have some great examples of people who have actually successfully broken out of the echo chamber and are making their voices heard and have got great things about libraries out into the public eye. So we'll start with Toby Greenwald, who Ned mentioned the Seth Godin Uber Echo disaster. Toby Greenwald, like many other librarians, wrote a response to this. Unlike most other librarians, he wrote it for the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post is an online publication. It's very widely read. It's got, I don't know the figures, but I would argue it's got a lot of the same demographic reading it that reads the sort of stuff that Seth Godin puts out. So they're sort of media savvy, tech savvy people. So that actually had quite a good chance of reaching some of the people who saw Seth Godin's erroneous information in the first place. And what Toby did in this article was, first of all, and most importantly, corrected the misinformation that Seth Godin had put out. And he also, in this little bit I've just snipped out in that screenshot there, he says, "I put the question to you, Huffington Post readers. If you are a regular library user, and once again thank you, what about that experience works for you? How would you push our services to non-library users? If you're not a library user, how can we prove ourselves to you?" And I just think that's great, the fact that he actually used this space to literally ask for feedback and actually try and start a conversation, which he did. The Huffington Post does allow comments, and there were, by the time they closed comments on this piece, there were nearly 100 posted on that, so it was a fantastic conversation that went on. Some pro-library, some anti-libraries, but a conversation happening out in public where people could see it. Phil Bradley again, at the back, everybody look at Phil again. I did warn you. Phil Bradley rang up Radio 5 a while back to talk about the dangers of social media. There was some possibly slightly hysterical reporting going on about the dangers of Facebook and how Facebook was murdering our children. And Phil went on to talk about, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, to talk about information literacy and the need to educate young people about the potential dangers of talking to people online and how you keep yourself safe, rather than, for example, encouraging parents to hack into their children's Facebook accounts, as somebody had suggested on Radio 5 in the same programme. And that was so successful and so popular, he was invited back again the next day to talk on Radio 5 again. So, well done, Phil. Nice one. I'm just going to see if I can get any of this to play.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I also thought it was my I am a librarian, and that's one of the reasons why I'm such an honor to be here. Librarian on the stage, maybe.
I just wanted to play the opening bit because I love the way she's all, oh, librarian on the stage, and she's all excited about it. Partly because I think it's really cute, but also because she's talking at a TEDx event there. TED Talks, for those of you who don't know, TED stands for Technology Entertainment Design. And there are a series of talks there. People from all different fields and all different work areas come to talk about an enormous range of different topics. And they're generally people who are sort of thought leaders, talking about things that interest them. So it's not the sort of thing where you tend to get a lot of librarians talking about the value of libraries, as Christy Hill here was talking about. And she comes on stage there and she's a little bit like, oh, librarian on the stage, how exciting. Because it is unusual for her to be there. And it's probably unusual for her audience to be listening to a librarian talking. That's probably not what they were expecting. But she did it, and she reached people who probably wouldn't have expected to see a librarian come along and didn't think that a librarian had something of value to talk about at an event like TED. We actually mentioned this, we did a version of this presentation in York in July, and Bethan over there tweeted about it, mentioned TEDx, and one of the TED organisers that's probably monitoring tweets for any mentions of TED, and tweeted back with, "Librarians are my heroes," which I love, and I think I'm going to print that tweet out and frame it, have it on my desk for inspiration. Along the same lines, a pair of librarians went to talk at, I can never say this without tripping over my own tongue, SXSW, which is South by Southwest, which is a conference for entertainment and media professionals. So the audience is full of video game designers and screenwriters and, well, trendy new media types. And these two librarians went along to talk about the digital divide, which is something that is, as librarians, that's our area of expertise. That's something that librarians have an involvement with and will know a lot about, the digital divide, and are working hard at trying to bridge the digital divide. It's not something that your average video game designer probably knows much about, because I would argue that by its nature, people on the other side of the digital divide aren't going to be buying video games. So the people who write them probably aren't thinking about that audience at all, or even about the existence of the digital divide. So that's a way to bring one of our topics of expertise to an audience that really needs to know about it, and to remind people that we do have expertise in that area. This is quite a fun one. There's a group on Facebook for people for a library-themed Ben & Jerry's flavour, which I am a member of. It's got about 8,000 fans on Facebook, and I just like this because it's fun. And it's, you know, there's no real serious campaigning going on there. There's nothing in that group that's telling people about why libraries are important or about potential cuts to libraries and how you can fight that. It's just a positive, fun association for people to have. I mean, the group description, I think, says it all. The logic behind this: libraries are awesome, Ben & Jerry's is tasty, therefore a library-themed Ben & Jerry's flavour would be tasty awesome. Can't argue with that, really. It's very true. So it's a good way to actually just get people thinking about libraries in a positive way. And I think that in itself is very valuable. Several librarians recently have written for The Guardian's Comment is Free. The Guardian runs a series called You Told Us, which is essentially anyone can write in and suggest a topic, and if the editors like it, they'll invite you to write about it, and your article is then posted on the Comment is Free website along with all of their other editorial pieces. So we're a little bit short of time, so I'm going to skip over this quite quickly. Ian Clark was first up. He wrote about the relevance of libraries in the digital age. Lauren Smith, who we're going to mention in a moment, talked about the Save Doncaster Libraries campaign. So that's a local campaign that she got into national media by writing for The Guardian's Comment is Free. And most recently, Simon Barron wrote about borrowing ebooks in libraries, and specifically commenting on the Publishers Association's announcement that they didn't want people to borrow ebooks from libraries unless they physically came to the building and plugged their e-reader into a library computer and downloaded it that way. Because everybody's going to do that, and that doesn't defeat the purpose of ebooks at all. So all of this reached a national audience and brought libraries into the public eye, and even actually reached an international audience. Most recently, Simon's article about ebooks was quoted in the New York Times, and Simon was personally quoted, which he's quite excited about that, and understandably I would be. So that's it for our examples. We're now going to round up by talking about some strategies to use based on some of the suggestions that we've had and some of the examples of failure and success, and looking at what we can learn from that and how we can apply those. First off, it's important to remember, let's put this together, there is no such thing as abstaining from library advocacy. You're either doing it or you're doing it wrong. And that might be a slightly aggressive way of putting it, but I think sometimes you might need to be a little bit aggressive, because this is all of our jobs now. If you're not putting your effort into promoting the library, into making sure that every user of your library has a positive experience, into making sure that every non-user you come into contact with knows how great your library is, then you're not helping. This is something. I mentioned Lauren Smith writing for the Guardian about the Save Doncaster Libraries campaign. She's put together a bit of advice for us of her experience of campaigning. Lauren, of course, is also involved with Voices for the Library, she was mentioned there. I won't read this whole thing out because it's quite lengthy, but if you want to have a look at the Prezi later, all of the details on there. Lauren's tips are essentially, first of all, ask for things. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you want the local paper to write about your campaign, phone them and tell them about it and ask them to write about it. All people can say is no. There's never any harm in asking. Second of all, grab every opportunity that comes your way. Lauren is fantastic at this. Lauren almost never turns down a request for a statement or an interview. She puts a lot of effort into that, and I think that's really necessary. You can't start turning down things if you're going to be serious about advocacy. This next point is one of my favourites. She says, keep remembering that it's important and you love it. Because campaigning can be tough, as Beth mentioned, it's not always an easy ride, so it's quite important to remember actually why you're doing it in the first place. Be confident. If you're not that confident, fake it. People generally, if you act confident, people will respond to you as if you are. And finally, ask for help and use your network. There's no need to work alone in this kind of thing. There are a lot of people who are interested in promoting libraries, so pool your resources and work together. It's also really important, if you're going to promote your library services, to do it somewhere that your users will see it. So first of all, if you're going to write articles for publications, write for publications that your users read. There's nothing wrong with writing for library journals, but they do have a very limited audience. There's an example here of the Harvard Business Review recently published a book on knowledge management, and they talk about all aspects of knowledge management. They quoted those people who were involved in it. They did not quote a single librarian. They did not mention the role of libraries in knowledge management. And that really is a slap in the face to any librarian that had anything to do with knowledge management, because that's quite a central thing that a lot of us are involved in. And the author of this article, Cynthia Chamel, she's basically saying that, well, how can the Harvard Business Review write a book on knowledge management and not include the role of librarians? Well, that's simple. They don't know what we do. They don't know because we're not on their radar. So if we're going to get on these people's radar, if we're going to remind people who don't already know our services, then push them in front of people. Along the same lines, if you're going to advertise library services, it's great to stick up a poster in your library or put a note on your library website or your page on the intranet, but that's not going to be seen by the people who don't come to your library and don't know you have a website. There's a great example here of a public library in Canada that made some posters to go in their local grocery store. Fantastic, that's a place everyone's going to pass through. There's a suggestion here about going to non-library conferences. This librarian mentions an exchange she had at Science Online. Actually, several exchanges she had of telling people that she was a librarian and being greeted with a baffled stare and a, what are you doing here then? There's no reason not to go along to the same events that your users are. If you can go along to these things, make yourself known, and if you can even speak at them, you'll get known as an expert in your field, and that's what we are. We are subject experts. I'm just going to mention briefly the SLA's alignment project. SLA, a year or two ago, undertook an enormous research project where they looked at what librarians thought was the most valuable services and what library users thought were the most valuable services. And they found quite a big gulf between the two. For example, when it came to managing a physical library, 28% of librarians thought that was a valued service. Only 8% of users thought that was valuable. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about using the right language and reflecting your users' values back to them. Find out what they think is important, and those are the services you really push and promote. The stuff they don't think is important, by all means keep doing it, but don't talk about it. They don't need to know if they don't find it important. And my last point, simply avoid mixing our messages. A lot of libraries, and I know that's something I'm guilty of myself, you can tell users that the library is a welcoming place. They can come in, they can spend the day, they can learn things, fantastic. And then they turn up and they're greeted with 1,001 signs telling them all the things they're not allowed to do. So you say to users, yes, you can come and spend the whole day here and do all your work, but don't you dare bring any food in. And yes, this is a comfortable place and do all the research you want, but don't you dare switch your mobile phone on. And oh, actually, you're 5p over the fine limit, so sorry, but you can't actually use any of our resources today. There are obviously reasons for every policy that's in place, otherwise they wouldn't have been introduced in the first place. But it can be worth taking a bit of a hit for the library, relaxing some of those rules if it makes it easier for your users to actually do what they want to do in that place.
And just to kind of try and justify my hectoring library poster thing, the point, there are people like Lauren or like Joe who make amazing opportunities to advocate libraries, and that's amazing. If you can do that, that's brilliant, but not everybody can do that. But the least that you have to do is take opportunities that fall into your lap. So it's literally as simple as if somebody asks you what you do, not fudging the question, but actually taking that opportunity to really tell them what you do and try and advocate libraries. Because if you don't, and if you just kind of fudge it off, and then you're not just not doing anything, you're actually contributing to the problem. So that's why I made it so aggressive and provocative. I won't go into this detail because I'm running out of time, but basically self-advertising is the idea of kind of creating a Trojan horse where you package up information about libraries in something that's so intrinsically awesome, it gets picked up by people who aren't interested in libraries, and they're kind of fed propaganda through that door. So this happened with the Library 101 video that David Lee King and Library Man, Library Man's real name is Clark Kent, got onto Boing Boing, which is a kind of big Hoosier intellectual website, even though they don't normally do anything about libraries, because it was just a kind of cool and funny video. So it's the idea of dressing stuff up in such a way that it carries far further than it would do normally. Andy Woodworth suggests developing a team of rivals. Obviously it's great to read other library blogs and find out what your peers are thinking. It's very comforting to have your views reflected back at you, but it's also important to know what the opposition are thinking or what detractors of libraries have to say, so that we're quicker with our responses when we get the chance to stand up for ourselves. He says, I can only speak for myself, but I try and avoid homogeny in my Google Reader feeds by trying to find a diversity of voices on library and librarian issues. In building my own virtual team of rivals, I subscribe to several blogs written by librarians and MLS graduates, to which I rarely agree with their viewpoints. I would argue that you have to also read the blogs written by people who are library detractors as well. I'm a big fan of responding to attacks. and the same medium that they came from. But it's really important that the same audience that hears the bad stuff about libraries also hears the good stuff from the librarians. So if someone writes an article in the Times saying libraries are rubbish, write to the Times rather than to each other or to the Guardian even. It's important that the same group of people get the riposte. Finally, this kind of, well, penultimately, links the whole thing of what we've been saying. Big fan of Ian Clarke's blog, Thoughts of a Wannabe Librarian, and his point is that we need to take control of the narrative, and this is essentially what we've been saying all through the thing. The narrative is being written by people like the Coalition, by KPMG, by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, by Tim Coates, by nostalgic Joan Bakewell figures, by anti-library Frank Skinner type figures, and we're not writing it ourselves, and we have to force our own voice into that narrative so that the public are hearing from people who actually understand libraries and can properly communicate their value, rather than from a bunch of people who may either be misleading or just horrible. And there's the kind of curve of engagement graph. At the moment, I think we spend quite a lot of time at the top ends of this graph. We're either trying to fight back against the actively hostile, and I don't think they're ever going to be converted to the actively hostile. I think it's important to respond to their attacks, but I don't think we're ever going to make them into library lovers. Or we advocate to the kind of super fans, because that's really comforting and nice. When people really love libraries, it's great to talk to them because it's a very positive experience. Further down the kind of the curve, obviously regular patrons, it's very important to advocate to them because you don't want to lose them. But I do think we need to be focusing more of our resources in terms of our money, our time, our energies into people who are currently indifferent. Because not everybody is going to need libraries, not everybody is going to want to use libraries. The most important thing is everybody can make an informed decision as to whether to use their library or not. And that's not the case at the moment because libraries have changed so much in the last 30 years that public perception is lagging a decade or two behind. So we need to work on those who may well want to use our services if they only knew what they were. And finally, a very good way of escaping the echo chamber is to tap into the zeitgeist or pastiche the zeitgeist. A while ago there was a viral marketing campaign for Old Spice where Old Spice man would stand in the shower and talk to Twitter users about whatever it was that they wanted him to talk about. So people would tweet at the guy and say, you know, can you talk about fish, and then he would stand in the shower and he'd talk about fish, and it was very successful because it was so instant. It was like an instantaneous marketing thing. And this video, which I now hate because it's failed for 2 presentations in a row, is New Spice Man parodied by a library in America, and it's so well done that it's had 2.5 million YouTube hits. So look it up when you get home. If you type in New Spice Librarian or Study Like a Scholar, it's an absolutely brilliant video. It's done with such care and attention, and it's far, far, far outreached the library community. And again, there's people tuning in because they want to see a great video, and they're being fed the kind of library propaganda through the back door again. So now it's over to you. It's over to you in that you've probably got like a half a minute for questions, and also over to you in that you can go away from here and escape the echo chamber all the time. Laura and I are really chuffed that it might be a coincidence of timing, but it does seem to be that since we started talking about this, people are actually escaping the echo chamber more. People are doing things like having a punt on writing for The Guardian rather than writing for a library journal, which is brilliant. So it's something that is an annoying problem, and it's a real problem for libraries, but it's literally one that we can all solve. And there's a brilliant thing, I don't know if Adrienne is here. Is Adrienne here? No, okay. On the way home from a CILIB event that she went to, she had a CILIB kind of jute bag, and someone asked her about it on the tube, and she ended up basically holding the cork to the whole carriage, saying how amazing libraries were, and at least 3 or 4 people promised to go and check out the library, having not done so, in the next morning. And literally that makes an impact. If there's 50 people here and we all did it on the way home on the tube, then that's 200 people who then go and check out the library tomorrow. So genuinely, it is something that we can actually all do.